king of German mercenaries.
Chapter 73 Trade Sanctions. In Paris, France, Charles VIII was furious in the palace because Marin's great achievements had spread from the Holy Roman Empire to France. The reaction of the citizens of the Holy Roman Empire was different. The citizens of the Holy Roman Empire naturally felt proud because they were the victorious party. However, France, as the defeated party, was very unhappy. In particular, Charles VIII, who was defeated with 8,000 French knights, became a laughingstock. The French did not dare to laugh at him openly, but the Germans, Spanish, British and Italians did not care. Therefore, Charles VIII was now a laughingstock throughout Europe. What was particularly humiliating to Charles VIII was that the man who defeated him was not a famous general, but a 17-year-old boy who led troops into battle for the first time. Charles VIII could still find excuses for losing to a famous general, but he was ashamed to lose to a 17-year-old boy. Although the French were defeated by a surprise attack, no matter what, they should not lose to a 17-year-old child. Therefore, Charles VIII was very averse to anyone talking about Italy. If anyone dared to talk about it, he would be furious and draw his sword. Deep down, ever since he heard that Marin was named Baron of Texel in the northern Netherlands, Charles VIII wanted to send troops to Texel Island, capture Marin and bring him to Paris to torture him in various ways. However, Europe is different from Asia. If the Emperor of Asia loses face, it is easy for him to send his men to hunt down the person who made the Emperor lose face. But in the Middle Ages, Europeans paid special attention to aristocratic manners. In Europe, it was a common practice that no nobles should be. If a noble surrendered on the battlefield, he must be treated with respect and wait for the other party to pay the ransom. The reason for this unspoken rule is that the European nobles were worried that they would be captured on the battlefield and attacked. Therefore, generally no one dared to trample on this rule. Because, if anyone who tramples on this rule, as well as their family members, are captured on the battlefield, the enemy can kill you without regard for your manners. If Marin was still an apprentice knight and did not belong to the aristocracy, Charles VIII could openly send people to capture and kill him. Because aristocratic manners are not applicable to the common people. However, Marin is now an imperial baron canonized by the Holy Roman Empire and has joined the aristocracy. If Charles VIII sent people to besiege Marin, it would be breaking the rules. Moreover, Marin defeated the French army on the battlefield. Although there was an element of sneak attack, he also fought the French with real weapons. If Charles VIII could not defeat Marin on the battlefield, but killed Marin in a nearly cheating way, he would probably be despised and spurned by all the nobles in Europe. But Charles VIII was a man who wanted to save face and become the hegemon of Europe. As a hegemon, he must have a good reputation first and must not do things that would make the nobles despise him. To be more specific, you can't break the rules. In order to usurp the throne, King Richard III of England imprisoned and murdered his two nephews. In order to prevent others from finding evidence, he cruelly ordered his men to nail the two young princes to the wall. This is similar to what Wang Jinshan did in The Untold Story. In fact, Jin Yong imitated this plot. Although he left no evidence, he was despised by the whole of Europe because he became the biggest suspect in the murder of his nephew. Even because Richard III broke the rules, his subordinates also disobeyed him. When Henry VII raised the banner of rebellion, many powerful nobles of the York dynasty turned to support Henry VII and betrayed Richard III. Charles VIII wanted to send troops to kill Marin, but he didn't want to break the rules and cause himself to be deserted by his friends and relatives. Richard III's previous experience was not far away. However, Charles VIII could not bear to see Marin live a good life. At the suggestion of his military advisor, Charles VIII decided to punish Marin in other ways. After thinking about it, Charles VIII ordered, all French merchants, as well as foreign merchants who want to do business in France, are not allowed to have any trade relations with the barony of Texel. If they violate this rule, once it is verified, they will be expelled from France and banned from entering again. This sanction may not be very harsh, but it is also very lethal. Because France is the most important wine-producing region in Europe. In the Middle Ages, most Europeans did not drink water. No matter they were nobles or commoners, they all liked to drink wine or beer as their daily beverages. Only the serfs of the lowest status would drink water, and they would drink raw water. The wine produced in the southwest of France is of good quality and low price, and has always been one of the best-selling commodities in Europe. Many countries, including France's archenemy Britain, import large quantities of wine from France. If those merchants still want to import wine from France, they must draw a clear line with Marin. This move was ruthless. Charles VIII also learned from intelligence that Texel Island was building a lighthouse and a dock, which was obviously intended to develop maritime trade. His move was to cut off Marin's momentum to make a fortune. However, when Marin learned of Charles VIII's sanctions, he was greatly relieved. As a French king, how powerful was Charles VIII? If he had been as shameless as Richard III and sent a large army to attack Texel, he would have been unable to stop it. The reason why Marin brought his 400 men to Texel Island to settle down was actually to guard against French revenge. After all, Texel Island is on the sea. If France sends a fleet to besiege Texel Island, Marin can only retreat and resist. Moreover, because Marin was the emperor's man, he was not on the same side as the traditional princes. If he was besieged by the French, no nearby lords would come to rescue him. Even the Netherlands under the emperor's name was unwilling to rescue him. Because the local nobles of the Netherlands were still somewhat resistant to the emperor, Maximilian I imprisoned in the palace by the Dutch nobles, and it was Frederick III who sent troops to rescue him. Therefore, during this period of time, Marin was actually trembling with fear. However, Marin was greatly relieved after Charles VIII announced the sanctions ban. Because, if Charles VIII used this method to deal with himself, it basically meant that he would not send troops to deal with him. Although this kind of economic sanctions is indeed a big blow to Marin, it is still better than taking his own life. Moreover, Marin's main trading partner, the Wiggins Chamber of Commerce, had no trade relationship with France. Moreover, the trade between the two sides was conducted in a low-key manner, and outsiders were not very clear about it. Therefore, Charles VIII's ban actually had limited lethality. Because the French ban most affected Dutch merchants in Flanders, which had many trade links with France, as well as the British, Spanish and Italians. Among the three countries of Britain, Spain and Italy, Spain itself is an important wine-producing area. Therefore, Spain is not greatly affected by the French ban. Italy also has many wine-producing areas. Only Britain has to import a large amount of wine from abroad because of the continuous rain and lack of sunlight and temperature required for grape growth. The largest source of wine imports to the UK is the Bordeaux region. As for the Holy Roman Empire, some merchants will be threatened because the Holy Roman Empire has a long border with France, and many people have close trade ties with France. But there are also many merchants, accounting for more than half of the total number, who have nothing to do with the French. In particular, the Hanseatic League, which dominated the trade in northwestern Europe and northern Europe, did not have a very close trade relationship with France. And Marin now wanted to establish a relationship with the Hanseatic League and make a fortune in this way. Therefore, although the French sanctions would make many people who should have become customers separate from Marin, it would not delay Marin's rise to wealth. At most, the degree of wealth would be suppressed, rather than being devastated. Another important reason is that Germans prefer to drink beer rather than wine. Although the wine production in Germany is low, it is enough for consumption. Because in Germany, the only people who drink wine are often nobles and priests. Because there are few people who drink wine, although the local wine production in Germany is low, it is barely enough for consumption. Therefore, the amount of wine imported from France in Germany is not very large. Therefore, when many people are pessimistic about Marin, Marin still goes his own way and devotes all his efforts to the development of Texel Island. However, in order not to anger Charles VIII and make him tear his face and send people to encircle him, Marin decided to be soft on the surface and make Charles VIII feel better. Just like learning from Gogiens, sleeping on firewood and tasting gall, as a time traveler from modern times, Marin does not think that face is more important than life. So, Marin sent someone to present an apology to Charles VIII, emphasizing the great harm of syphilis and the coping strategies. Marin did this not only to give Charles VIII a way out, but also to hope that France could curb the spread of syphilis. Because if syphilis spread in France, it would easily spread to neighboring countries and cause a pandemic throughout Europe. This was indeed the case in history. Syphilis was even brought to the East by Portuguese sailors. Charles VIII did not accept Marin's apology, but he attached some importance to the syphilis mentioned by Marin. Because syphilis was also an important reason for the French to flee Italy. More strictly speaking, without the rampant syphilis, Charles VIII would not have needed to flee north, and would not have been defeated by Marin. Moreover, Marin's apology made Charles VIII feel a little better, and his urgency to kill Marin faded a lot. Of course, this also shows that Charles VIII would not openly send someone to kill Marin. If they met on the battlefield, Charles VIII would definitely not hesitate to offer a reward to let the French army kill Marin. Moreover, it is not ruled out that Charles VIII would send assassins to assassinate Marin. However, these two dangers are not unsolvable. As long as you pay attention, it is still relatively safe. You know, assassins these days basically use daggers and crossbows to assassinate, which is easier to take targeted precautions. Even the assassination of King Henry IV of France in the early 17th century was stabbed to death with a sharp blade. As for muskets, at least the currently popular matchlock muskets are not suitable for assassination. Because the ignited matchlock of the matchlock can be easily discovered by the guards in advance. Only when the flintlock appears, it becomes possible to assassinate with a flintlock pistol. However, the flintlock, smoothbore flintlock, has low power and extremely poor accuracy, and is not a good weapon. Only rifled guns with very high accuracy are good weapons for assassination. In other words, even if Marin encounters an assassination, it can be avoided if he takes precautions. However, it is unlikely that Charles VIII would send someone to assassinate Marin. Because, as the King of France, if he sent someone to assassinate a small baron like Marin, he would probably be laughed at by the whole of Europe, and it would be more humiliating than losing the war. Only by sending someone to defeat Marin on the battlefield or even kill him could he wash away his shame. Chapter 74 Recruiting Frisian Fishermen. Coveting the huge profits from the Age of Discovery, Marin definitely did not want to miss the newly emerging Age of Discovery. However, he also saw that there were only 200 fishermen in his territory, of which only 30 were young and strong. If he wanted to go on a great voyage, he couldn't even gather enough sailors for a ship. You know, a small boat like Columbus's flagship, Santa Maria, had 39 sailors on board. Moreover, Marin could not recruit all the young and strong fishermen to be sailors. Otherwise, the old and weak fishermen would starve. Because the main force of fishing is the young and strong. Marin thought about it and finally decided to recruit Frisian fishermen to enrich the territory and increase the reserve of sailors. Marin checked the information and found that the nobles exploited the fishermen a lot these days. Generally speaking, the lords along the coast would require the fishermen to hand over more than 40% of their catch. Some of them were fresh sea fish, and the rest were pickled salted fish. But the problem is that these days, salted fish require a lot of salt to be pickled. Fishermen are poor, and they have to pay for expensive salt to pickle the fish for the lord. In total, the cost they pay to the lord is as much as 60% of the catch. In addition, 10% of the catch needs to be handed over to the church. Therefore, the fishermen's harvest is only about 30%, and their lives are very difficult. If Marin wants to recruit fishermen, he must relax the conditions, otherwise it will not be attractive. So, Marin thought about it and decided to only charge 30% of the fishermen's catch. In addition, they can come to him to reimburse the salt needed to pickle the 30% of the catch. In this way, the fishermen only need to pay about 40% of their harvest, including the church's tithe, which is nearly half of the usual amount. Naturally, the fisherman's life will be much better. Moreover, as a wealthy man, Marin decided to set up a bank specifically for fishermen, providing them with low-interest loans and encouraging fishermen to raise funds collectively to buy larger fishing boats. For example, a ship of more than 100 tons like Columbus' flagship, Santa Maria, is definitely enough for fishing in the North Sea. In fact, there are many fishermen available for recruitment along the North Sea coast. For example, there are many Dutch fishermen available for recruitment in the Netherlands. However, there is a problem. Those Dutch fishermen serve the Netherlands, which is controlled by the emperor. Recruiting those Dutch fishermen is actually meant to steal the emperor's support. Marin needs the emperor's support, so he cannot make enemies with the emperor. But those Frisian fishermen are different. The Frisians currently live mainly in the Frisian Noble Republic, including the later Dutch provinces of Friesland and Groningen, as well as the county of East Frisia where Lady Marie came from. Neither of these two forces was strong. Moreover, although the Frisians were West Germanic peoples, they were excluded from mainstream Germanic society. In other words, the Germans and the Dutch actually disliked the Frisians. In later generations of Germany, there are still many jokes that mock the stupidity of the Frisians. Moreover, the empire did not recognize either the Frisian Noble Republic or the county of East Frisia. The empire regarded these two countries as unruly, barbarian forces. Marin had read European history in his previous life and knew that around 1500, Maximilian I would give the Frisian Noble Republic to Duke Albrecht of Saxony as a reward for the Duke's help in suppressing the rebellion in Flanders, the Netherlands in 1492. As for the county of East Frisia, the emperor sent a joint army of 24 lords to conquer it around 1515, but they failed. The East Frisian army was quite strong. In other words, the two small countries of the Frisian Noble Republic and the East Frisian county were rejected. It would not be a big problem for Marin to recruit Frisians. The Frisian Aristocratic Republic, which is across the sea from Texel Island, is not a united centralized country, but an alliance of many noble territories. Even if Marin offends such a country, it is difficult for them to make a decision to retaliate militarily. Because, if they want to start a war, their noble parliament will have to argue for a long time. By the time they finish arguing, the other side will have been prepared. Moreover, the combat effectiveness of the Frisian Republic of Nobles was not as good as that of the county of East Frisia. Although its area was about twice that of the county of East Frisia, its military forces were relatively scattered, belonging to multiple noble forces, and the command was not unified. After obtaining the emperor's approval, Duke Albrecht of Saxony did not have much trouble in conquering the Frisian Republic of Nobles. However, the emperor sent troops to attack the county of East Frisia, but was defeated. Therefore, Marin is not afraid of the hostility of the Frisian noble republic. Moreover, in a few years, this republic will be destroyed by the Duke of Saxony. What Marin needs to do is to recruit enough Frisian fishermen before the Duke of Saxony occupies the Frisian noble republic to prepare for his own sailing career. Or, take advantage of the Duke of Saxony's unpreparedness and take control of this small country in advance. If a conflict breaks out, Marin thinks it will be better. In this way, Marin will have an excuse to attack the Frisian noble republic. So, Marin secretly sent people to the coastal fishing villages of the Frisian noble republic to carry out propaganda and mobilize Frisian fishermen to move to Texel Island. As for the conditions, they would naturally greatly reduce taxes and provide them with loans to buy large ships. However, although the conditions offered by Marin were good, the German men sent by Marin could not gain the trust of the Frisian fishermen. Marin thought about it and hired 20 Frisian fishermen from Texel Island with very good treatment, and asked them to persuade the fishermen along the coast of the Frisian noble republic. Sure enough, using these people to persuade people had a much better effect. Many Frisian fishermen believed it and brought their families and small fishing boats to Texel Island. Marin warmly welcomed these Frisian fishermen and arranged for people to build cheap and practical adobe houses for them. Later, he helped to renovate the fishermen's docks in Terhollandsche and Oudeschild to allow more fishing boats to dock. Afterwards, Marin once again hired some eloquent Frisian fishermen who had recently relocated and asked them to sneak back and convince more people. These people were originally residents of the Frisian noble republic, and their persuasion was more effective than that of the Frisian fishermen sent from Texel Island. As a result, more Frisian fishermen were persuaded and came here with their families. Chapter 75, Frunsberg, the father of mercenaries. After Marin became a big star in the empire, many people defected to Maximilian I, and many people also went to Texel Island to visit Marin, the young star. As a result, many young wandering knights rushed from the inland of Germany to Den Helder in the Netherlands, and took a boat to Texel Island to visit Marin. Marin was looking to recruit talents, so he patiently received these young people. In fact, every meeting was equivalent to an interview with the visitor. Most of these visitors are young people who have not yet obtained the title of knight. They come from afar to learn from Marin and contribute to their own official knighthood. In order to recruit talents, Marin adopted a courteous and humble attitude, warmly entertained the trainee knights who came, and invited them to visit his 400 elite men. However, what made Marin depressed was that these people had a strong desire to learn, but when Marin tried to recruit them, they basically refused politely. It turns out that they all think that Marin's temple is too small and there is no room for advancement. These conceited young people think they are not much worse than Marin. Marin can become a baron, why can't they? Therefore, these trainee knights basically did not accept the olive branch that Marin threw out, which made Marin very depressed. In fact, Marin also had a way to keep them. That is to directly appoint them as official knights of the barony. However, Marin was unwilling to do so because the canonization of knights was not a random act. Schwartz was canonized as a knight not only for his ability and loyalty, but also for his contributions in Italy. You know, Schwartz is Marin's adjutant in Italy. Moreover, Schwartz is in charge of daily military training. Marin himself actually mainly guides Schwartz. Schwartz was canonized as a knight, and the 400 soldiers had no objection. However, if Marin wanted to enthrone a foreign apprentice knight as a formal knight all at once, these 400 soldiers might not buy it. Therefore, Marin could not easily promise and confer titles on the young apprentice knights who came to visit him, but could only describe a bright future for them. After all, clear rewards and punishments are essential qualities for a qualified commander. However, these apprentice knights from knight families were all educated and not stupid. It was true that they admired Marin, but serving under Marin could only be formal knights at most. And knights could not be hereditary. These ambitious young people all wanted to become hereditary barons like Marin. Therefore, they were not fooled by Marin. After learning some experience in training infantry from Marin, they all chose to leave. These apprentice knights from noble families were not easy to fool, but the young men from commoner families were much easier to deal with. In addition to the apprentice knights, the young people who came to visit Marin also included many commoners from wealthy families. The poor children did not have the money to travel to Texel. After failing to recruit those apprentice knights, Marin turned his attention to these commoners. Since they were commoners from wealthy families, many of them were educated and cultured. Marin was in urgent need of educated people to help him manage Texel Island. So, Marin began to win over these educated civilian children. After much persuasion and deception, some educated children of commoners did stay. As a result, Marin finally had a mayor to manage the city of Denburg, a 28-year-old civilian named Hader Lehmann. Hader Lehmann's ancestors were also from a knight family, otherwise he would not have a surname. However, he was from a branch of a knight family, and after several generations, he gave up the knight tradition and turned to business. Therefore, Hader is now actually a merchant's son. However, he went to university in Cologne and studied law. Now, he has just graduated from the law department of the University of Cologne and is not in a hurry to find a job. Instead, he is traveling first to gain more experience. How could Marin let go of such a talent? College students in the Middle Ages were definitely rarer than pandas. Marin made the decision on the spot and appointed Heidel as the mayor of Denburg and the judge of the Texel court. Thus, Texel Island welcomed the first official civil servant since Marin took over. Hader himself was also very happy. Because, as a commoner, although he went to college, he would definitely be a lawyer if he went out to work. As for court judges, only people of noble birth could serve as judges. Although being a lawyer was a good profession, it could not be compared with a formal official position. As a result, Hader surrendered decisively and joined Marin's army, assisting Marin in handling the political affairs of Texel Island. After that, Marin recruited several educated young people from civilian backgrounds to serve as mayors of Thorlinch, Odeschild and Yenching respectively. Just when Marin was happy about recruiting several intellectuals as his subordinates, the guards came to report that another young trainee knight had come to visit. After many failed attempts at recruitment, Marin had lost interest in recruiting those clever young apprentice knights. However, when Marin learned the young man's name, his eyes suddenly widened. Because the guard told Marin that the young man who came was named George Frunsberg. Who is George Frunsberg? He is a great man known as the father of German mercenaries. Marin had read the history of German mercenaries and knew that George Frunsberg was the most important mercenary general under Maximilian I in history, an important participant in the Italian War, and the terminator of the Swiss mercenary myth. However, Frunsberg seems to have only emerged in the Swabian War in 1499. Today, he is still an unknown apprentice knight in the Swabian region, and it is unknown which lord he is serving under. Marin decided to do his best to win over this great god. Even if he couldn't win him over, he had to establish a good relationship with him. Because in the future, Frunsberg would become the #1 henchman under Maximilian I. So, Marin cheered up and received the young Xiao Ji Frunsberg with the high standard of receiving aristocrats. Chapter 76, Recruiting Talents. George Frunsberg is still in Swabia, and together with his knight father, he serves as a heavy cavalryman of the Swabian Union Army. The difference is that his father is a formal knight who has been awarded the title and served as a captain. However, he, as an apprentice knight, can only serve as an ordinary heavy cavalryman. When the Italian War broke out, the army that George Frunsberg was in did not go to Italy because it was responsible for guarding against the Hungarians. Therefore, George Frunsberg did not get the opportunity to participate in the war. Originally, George Frunsberg did not have any big ambitions. His biggest wish was to become an officially knighted knight. However, the sudden appearance of Marin shocked George Frunsberg. Marin was also an apprentice knight, but he was younger. However, relying on his outstanding military exploits, Marin, who was only 17 years old, rose from an apprentice knight to a baron with a territory. This made George Frunsberg feel very uncomfortable. He was already 22 years old, his age in 1495, but he was far inferior to a 17-year-old boy. However, he was not a self-righteous person. George Frunsberg knew very well that he was already a qualified heavy cavalryman, and he was no problem in charging into battle. However, when it came to commanding ability, he was a bit at a loss. Even his father was just a cavalry captain, and he had no experience in commanding a larger army. And those senior commanders were all nobles who were too high up to waste their time to instruct a young trainee knight like him. It just so happened that he had an apprentice knight from the same hometown who had participated in the Italian War and had met Marin. According to the knight from the same hometown, the newly promoted Baron Marin was a young man with a good temper. So, George Frunsberg had the idea of visiting Marin. Originally, there would be another conflict between Austria and Hungary in 1496. However, because of the appearance of Marin, Maximilian I's prestige was greatly enhanced, which frightened the Hungarians. Therefore, the Hungarians did not dare to act rashly. And Maximilian I, due to financial reasons, mainly because the ransom had not been received, did not have the financial resources to fight Hungary. Therefore, 1496 was a very peaceful year. Seeing that there was nothing to do in the army, George Frundsberg asked his father to ask for leave and decided to go to Texel Island to visit Marin. If there was a chance, he wanted to ask for advice. Old Frundsberg naturally hoped that his son would have a promising future, and his son was now visiting the most promising young people in the empire in order to have a better future. How could he object? So, old Frundsberg successfully asked for a long vacation for his son and let his son do his work. With a nervous mood, George Frundsberg rode 2 horses from Swabia to Denburg on Texel Island and requested to meet Marin. In the Middle Ages in Europe, the social hierarchy was strict. It was impossible for commoners to visit nobles for no reason. Only the preparatory nobles like the apprentice knights were qualified to meet with barons like Marin. Moreover, whether to meet or not depended on Marin's mood. Unless it was a formal knight who came to visit, Marin would need to entertain him because he was a noble. It was still unknown whether an apprentice knight could meet Marin. Marin, who had failed to recruit those apprentice knights before, originally did not plan to attend the social event. However, after hearing the name, he immediately jumped up and decided to meet them immediately, and even used high etiquette. When Marin personally came out of the castle gate and cordially welcomed George Frundsberg in, George Frundsberg was confused. What was going on? The other party was a baron. Why was he so enthusiastic about a little apprentice knight like me? Under normal circumstances, a baron like Marin only needed to sit in a castle and wait for Frundsberg to come and see him, and there was no need to go out to greet him. Of course, he didn't know that Marin was targeting him. Before leaving, Marin had already planned that since Frundsberg would become the emperor's lackey in the future, it would be better to recruit him first. Anyway, he was a member of the emperor's faction, and he would inevitably continue to fight for the emperor in the future. If Frundsberg, the brother general, was recruited and he was allowed to lead troops to help the emperor fight in his own name, then he would not have to work for the emperor himself. Frundsberg leading troops to fight for the emperor would not affect his success, and could also help Marin accumulate merits. To be more specific, Frundsberg led his troops to help the emperor fight, and as Frundsberg's direct superior, he must have made contributions. Just like Marin's great contribution last time, Count Alfred was also greatly rewarded. It is said that he was rewarded with a fiefdom, while Count Alfred was just a court count without a fiefdom before. But at the same time, if Frundsberg made great contributions, the emperor would not give up on winning him over, as he loved talents. Frundsberg would not be short of high positions and generous salaries. Originally in history, Frundsberg was valued by Maximilian I because of his outstanding performance in the Swabian War. When Frundsberg participated in the Swabian War, he was only an apprentice knight and an officer at the level of a captain. But after Maximilian I began to appreciate him, he first granted him the noble title of knight in 1504, and then found a way to make him the great lord of Mindelheim. As for what title it was, it is unknown, because after the death of Frundsberg's grandson, their family was extinct. However, in later generations, there was the noble title of Prince of Mindelheim. It is estimated that this title should not be lower than the count. In other words, Marin had an evil plan in mind to make Frundsberg, the brother warrior, work for the emperor in his name for a long time. According to this plan, Frundsberg's military exploits would be shared with Marin, because Marin was his superior. At this time, Frundsberg was still confused. Although he looked a few years older than Marinksu, in his heart, well, let's not talk about it. Marin only used 10% of Uncle Benchen's skills to fool the young Frundsberg to the point where he was at a loss. George, can I call you that? Marin took Frundsberg's hand and led him to a seat. In the Middle Ages, people did not engage in homosexuality. Homosexuality was caused by the lack of women after they immigrated to the New World. Therefore, Marin's affectionate attitude would not scare the young man. Yes, it is an honor for you, Lord Baron, to address me in this way. The moment I saw you, I felt that you were very special. I don't know why, but I always had a feeling that you would become a great general in the future. Marin started to fool around again. No. Baron, you are too kind. The young man Frundsberg was a little shy. Especially, being praised in person by his idol. Just like a fanatical fan in the future, when he met Lu Tianwang, he was praised by the Tianwang. You will definitely be more famous than me in the future. No, I really think highly of you. Well, George, I've been thinking about a new, powerful infantry phalanx. Is it more powerful than the phalanx you used to defeat the King of France in Italy? Frundsberg asked with admiration. Frundsberg knew about Marin's phalanx, which was a spear formation with 100 archers. This was what his fellow countrymen said. It's much more powerful than that. My previous phalanx was specifically designed to fight against Swiss spearmen. When encountering knights, it could only defend, not attack. It was difficult for the knights' spears to penetrate their plate armor. In fact, Marin was talking about the Spanish phalanx. The Spanish phalanx used muskets, which could naturally restrain the knights wearing plate armor. So powerful. Frundsberg's eyes lit up. Of course. I won such a great victory last time because I ambushed the French knights. If this phalanx is formed, we can confront the French knights head-on and beat them to tears. So awesome. At this moment, Frundsberg was no longer like the wise and powerful mercenary marshal many years later. He was clearly just a young brainless fan. I'm not bragging. If we master this phalanx, our empire will be able to crush France without any problem. Marin was right. Shortly after the Spanish phalanx appeared, it happened to be the era of Charles V. Charles V relied on the Spanish finances, the brave mercenaries of the Holy Roman Empire, and the Spanish phalanx to suppress France. If it weren't for the German religious war and the Peasants' War that happened to break out, which consumed the strength of the Holy Roman Empire, the French would probably have been beaten even worse. Crush France. Frundsberg couldn't help but imagine it in his mind, but found that the difficulty was still quite high. Yes, crush France. I need excellent talents to train my troops now, to help me serve as adjutants, and at the same time, to study this powerful phalanx together. George, are you willing to come to my army and help me? Come to your army. Frundsberg was stunned. My idol recruited me. What should I do? Yes, I plan to organize a new square formation, and I think you are quite suitable to be the leader of the square formation. Phalanx commander. That's a position only barons and official knights are qualified to hold. My idol really thinks highly of me. Right. But I still have to go back to Swabia to serve. Frundsberg thought of himself still in service. What kind of service? You seem to be just an ordinary heavy cavalryman. What's there to be nostalgic about? Come with me and I'll make you an officer. But I can't just leave the army. It's okay. I'll write a letter for you and tell your former lord that I want to take you in as my disciple and keep you here. Can it work? In fact, what Frundsberg wanted to say was, can I get the official title of knight by following you? Because, if he followed his father and the original lord, he might be able to be officially knighted. Marin probably guessed a little bit of Frundsberg's thoughts. He knew very well that Frundsberg's original lord did not value him. It was only after he met Maximilian I that he managed to get the title of official knight with great difficulty. Sure. Help me train the new phalanx. When His Majesty goes to war next time, I will definitely lead the troops to serve His Majesty. If you come to help me train the troops, you will definitely be the phalanx leader. You will have more opportunities to show up in front of His Majesty. If you go back to be a heavy cavalry, with so many cavalry, will you have a chance to show up? If you follow me to command the phalanx and make military achievements, you are afraid that you will not have the opportunity to be promoted to knight, or even baron. Marin tempted. This. Frundsberg thought about it, and it was true. In front of Maximilian I, a phalanx commander or an unknown heavy cavalryman, who would be more likely to be favored by Maximilian I? There was no need to choose either one. Finally, Frundsberg made up his mind, I am willing to serve you, my lord. As for the army I belong to, leave it to me. I'll help you greet your lord. Oh, and you also need to write a letter home and give it to your father, telling him not to worry. Yes, my lord. Frundsberg changed roles quickly and soon recognized his master. Thus, the man known as the father of German mercenaries was fooled into boarding Marin's pirate ship.